Four, three, two, and one. Welcome, everyone, to Real Leaders Reunite 2026, where we are returning and rethinking what it means to be live with all of you, real leaders in the world. My name is Kevin Edwards, and I am the president here at Real Leaders. And on the side, I like to be a little MC. Maybe I'm gonna have a little late night DJ voice today and keep things smooth because today we have on two of the most incredible speakers in the world who are taking the time out of their day to be with you all. The first speaker here today is a dear friend of ours who spoke last year at Real Leaders Unite, and he was so good we wanted to bring him back again for 2026. This is one of the top keynote speakers in the world. This gentleman, I want to say, Don, I might get this wrong, but it's like 300,000 medallion points. I don't know what the scoring system is on Delta Skylines, but in terms of those points, last time I was talking to him on the phone, the captain came over the intercom and told the entire plane how many points this guy has, because this guy gives keynote speeches all around the world, 100 plus speeches sometimes in a year. Don't quote me on that, but it's close. Don Yaeger is a 14 or maybe is it 15 now? New York Times best-selling author. He's worked with some of the greatest athletes of all time, including Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Walter Payton. In his new initiatives and on his host as the Corporate Competitor podcast, Don interviews some of the best CEOs, such as Delta Airlines and many, many others, about what translates from sports to business. And so if you're an athlete, or maybe you're that high school athlete that never panned out, or maybe you got hurt, so you didn't play in college, but you're bringing the principles of leadership to the boardroom, this one is for you. In today's talk, Don is going to be talking about what make the great teams great. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we have a full hour keynote speech here today from the one and only Mr. Don Yaeger. Don.
Awesome.
You're in for a real treat today.
Your speaker today, Don Yaeger,
is a master storyteller known around the world.
as one of the most respected
and acclaimed writers of all
Don,
time.
go ahead and I think share your screen there with everybody.
Featuring 13 New
And
York
let's wrap this
Times.
one back.
Is it not sharing?
I think you got to press it again.
Okay, because I thought it said share, but we'll share screen. Awesome. My bad.
All good, all good. We said 14-time New York Times bestselling author. We didn't say, Riverside.
IT. We didn't say I was an IT expert, right? Exactly. Thank you very much for noting that. And by the way, the number of miles is 4 million miles on Delta, which is
4 million miles.
4 million miles, which is just a little silly, I know. But anyway, let's try again with that intro video. Thank you.
You're in for a real treat today.
Your speaker today, Don Yaeger,
Is a master storyteller known around the world.
as one of the most respected
And acclaimed writers of all time.
Don Yaeger has written 30 books.
Featuring 13 New York Times bestsellers.
including the one he wrote with a two-time World Series champion catcher, who looks a little bit like me.
Don's books, including the one he wrote with me, have sold more than 7 million copies and have been translated into dozens of languages.
Don began his career in a newspaper in Texas
and rose to become associate editor of Sports Illustrated magazine. And that's how I met him.
Hey, few people can really experience the kind of exciting resume that Don has had. He's a big player, baby.
In his 30 years as a journalist, he has worked with some of the greatest champions of our time.
Michael Jordan, Mia Hamm, Serena Williams, and even the All Blacks of New Zealand.
While Don's stories may come from the world of sports, his lessons are universal and can be applied to each of our lives.
The stories behind his books have even been made into major motion pictures. Why not?
You have to catch him hosting his popular podcast, Corporate Competitor.
That was a wonderful interview. It really was one of the really fun ones I've done. Really different. It was great.
It's good to see you. Over the years, we've become good friends.
He's been a guest on just about every major national television show, from Nightline to Good Morning America to Oprah.
This is Don Yaeger, who did that article I was telling you about that's in Sports Illustrated on newsstands now. You should really get it if you're a parent who has a child who's in sports.
He lived with my father, Walter Payton, writing his autobiography while Dad courageously battled cancer.
He even met with the President of the United States in the Oval Office.
Using lessons learned throughout his Hall of Fame career,
Don shares the formula he has seen great teams he's worked with and explains how those lessons can make your team better. Like I said, you're in for a real treat. He's awesome, baby, with a capital line. Now, please welcome my friend.
My friend.
My friend.
Now please welcome my friend Don Yaeger.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks for the opportunity to share with this amazing community. I've just become such a raving fan of the Real Leaders work that you all are doing and the people that you're bringing together. But as I think about this idea about what makes the great teams great, my deep dive into this subject really began about 15 years ago. I had been retired from Sports Illustrated. I'd been out talking to companies about individual high performance when an executive at one of those companies, Microsoft, actually grabbed me and said, "We love talking about individual performance, but what we really want to know is what allows some teams to be great? What allows some teams to consistently outperform their competitors?" I looked around, didn't find anything that quite met the requirements he was asking for in his question, and so I decided to take the subject on for myself. I did what many do in that time frame. I grabbed a yellow pad and I reached over and and I decided to ask the question at the very top of the screen. If I could think of great teams I'd want to learn from, teams that I'd want to be engaged with, what would those teams? Who would they be? What would they look like? On the left side of the page, obviously, because of my background in the world of sports, I thought I would first study great sports teams that had created great excellence in that space. And so as I began building the list, asking people who they would add to the list, the numbers, the names that came up most consistently were spread all over the globe. They were just so amazing, and I was thinking, gosh, I'd love to learn from each and every one of these teams. But I also realized that many of the organizations I'd get a chance to share this content with would not come from the sports world. They would either be businesses, for-profit businesses, maybe not-for-profit organizations, or maybe associations or charities. And so I started building a list of those organizations that I thought would be worthy of great research, good timing, asking them, would you allow me to come learn from you? But as the list kept growing, as I kept thinking about, and more people were pouring into the wisdom of this list, there was one team that kept coming up over and over again. One team that I would argue is probably the greatest collection of talent ever to wear the same jersey. Officially, they were known as the USA Men's National Basketball Team, Barcelona Olympics. But most of us who appreciate the game will remember that they really were known as the Dream Team, right? The International Olympic Committee had just changed its rules 3 years earlier, allowing every country on the planet to bring its best talent to the Olympics. No longer mattered whether the talent was professional or amateur, and the USA, in the sport of basketball, was committed to sending its very best. The team was so great that the players were known by single names. Their opponents couldn't wait for the opportunity to compete with Larry, Michael, Magic. Their opponents actually became their fans. I love this picture here. This is the Lithuanian men's basketball team. They've just been beaten by 51 points. And as soon as the game was over, they raced to the USA sidelines to take what was a 1992 version of a selfie, right? They basically just wanted a picture of themselves and this USA team on the same court. But actually, my favorite picture from that game is this one here. That's the Lithuanian team captain. He had come to the game with a camera hidden in his sock so that during the game he could slip the camera out of his sock, take pictures of his buddies playing against these legendary USA basketball players. By the way, that's when you know you've created a great team, a team that's magical, when your opponent is essentially reduced to sitting on the sidelines, taking pictures of you. Now, that team had high expectations, and it met every one of them. In fact, they went through that Olympic tournament beating their average world opponent by 43 points. No team in history has ever had a run anything like it. But what happens? Those of us who own businesses, run businesses, what happens when you set a goal, when you maybe create a quota for your sales team? What happens when that quota is met? When high expectations are met? What happens next is more is accepted, right? More is expected, excuse me, and more was exactly what this team was challenged to deliver, and they did. In the next two Olympic tournaments, USA basketball won gold medals again. But fascinating that in that run up to the 2000 games, just 8 years removed from the Dream Team, they encountered that same Lithuanian team that they had beaten by 51 points, and this time the Lithuanians lost by 2, and they actually had a shot at the buzzer to win. USA basketball suffered what many organizations do when things are riding high and you're doing really well. You get complacent, you get cocky, you stop doing the little things that made you successful. And it completely unraveled for this team just 2 years later. In the World Championships of Basketball, the FIBA World Championships, which are essentially the Olympics in the off years, USA sent 13 NBA All-Stars to the tournament to finish 6th. They went from Dream Team to 6th in the world in just a decade. You know, in the years since I've retired from Sports Illustrated, one of my favorite things to do is to identify media outlets that believe, as I do, that there are great lessons that sports can teach us. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a sports fan to appreciate that you can learn from sports. And I say often that my favorite sports section to write for and read over these last decade in the sports section at the Wall Street Journal. And when I say that, sometimes people give me that side eye, like the Wall Street Journal has a sports section. And the truth is, it does. It's a single page every day, one page, usually just 2 stories. But those of us who write for it are challenged to find lessons from sports that can apply into the worlds of business, that people can learn from, that people can apply. So I'm working at the time on a couple of ideas with the Wall Street Journal. The sports editor knew I, at the time, had been out talking to companies about individual high performance, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, talking about greatness. What do individuals do to make themselves so special? But the sports editor was more interested in the book I was writing to be published later the next year. The book the sports editor believes, as I do, and you probably do as well, that success leaves clues. And that if we want to be better at just about anything, we need to find success and seek its clues. What can we learn? What can we learn from successful organizations, successful people? And this book that I was writing was on high-performing teams, successful teams that were doing great things. The journey that I was on at the time had me all over the place, studying, sitting down, learning from the great teams of success, whether it was the women's soccer team at North Carolina, which won 21 national championships, or the professional basketball team in San Antonio, the Spurs. I even wanted to study a small team like the two-person women's volleyball team of Misty May Trainer and Carrie Walsh Jennings. These two women dominated the world for 15 years, but they did so even while one of them gave birth to two children, the other one tore her Achilles in Dancing with the Stars. But it didn't matter. Through injury, they were so good as a team that nobody could beat them. The journey even took me halfway around the world. I got a chance to go to New Zealand and learn from the All Blacks, maybe the most famous team, the greatest team I've ever had a chance to experience. I ended up in countries all over the world, getting a chance to learn from the best of all time. I also realized, though, that in order for me to do this presentation well, in order to understand success for the clues it would leave, I also needed to go study great businesses. So I sought out three dozen businesses of all sizes who have really just outperformed their market year in and year out to try to understand, how do you do it? What is it that makes you successful? And what I found while studying both sports and business teams is that there was a formula that came up really often. In fact, I would tell you, it came up in every conversation in some way, shape, or form of every one of these great organizations I was learning from. Most people think to be a winning team, a successful team, you have to focus on outcomes, right? You got to focus on product or maybe profit. The great teams, the leaders of every one of these organizations, and again, it did not matter, sports, business, nonprofit, the great leaders were telling me the hyper focus they put is on the idea of culture. Can you create the right culture, an organizational culture that is so strong that it affects everything you do? In fact, it becomes so strong that it doesn't take long for the culture of your organization to impact the behaviors of everyone within it. And the great leaders said that it was the behaviors that then became habits over a very short period of time. And they would tell you that it is the habits created in this formula that led to success. Begins with culture, ends with success, but it requires all this. In fact, in some way, shape, or form, this sentence came up in every interview I did. They said the culture of your team is going to happen. There will be a culture that will define your organization, and it will happen either by design or by default. And no great team lets it happen by accident. Now, I will tell you that the culture has become quite the buzzword, right? I mean, it's overused. It's often there's just way too much culture where the word just gets thrown about. So I wanted to define it in a way that really made sense for everybody I was working with. So I asked them to pour into the definition. The definition we came up with is the culture is the values, attitudes, standards, and beliefs that are acceptable in your team's environment. Now, acceptable doesn't sound like a dynamic word, right? It's not the word you would think if we're going to really put all this into it, but actually acceptable is the key word, because it doesn't matter. Your culture is not what you declare. It's not, I mean, there's nothing worse. Let's say you're in your organization, you declare, we start every meeting on time because that shows respect for all of our team. But everybody in the organization knows you can show up 6 minutes late, not miss a thing. What happens is not what you declare, it's what they know is accepted. So culture is what you'll accept. In fact, done right, culture becomes the common language of your team. And out of all of that came a book that I had the opportunity to author, a book that remains today one of my favorites of all the books that I've written, a book on the habits of high-performing teams. And what I found while working with these great teams, was that there were 16 things they do differently and better than their competitors. 16 things that give them a competitive advantage. I will tell you, there are notes and other things that are associated with what we're going to talk about today. So I want to make this available to you. If you've got a camera, if you can capture this QR code, I'll send you my notes from this presentation. You'll get them within the hour if you'll click on it and just give me an email address. I'll send those to you. But what stood out while I thought about these great teams was that there was one habit that came up in every team I talked to, one habit that stood out above the rest. And that is that the great teams don't just know their why, right? Which I love the idea of knowing your sense of purpose. The great teams feel it. It is in their bones. It is a part of their DNA. They feel their why. Now that said, now we're going to go back to the Wall Street Journal, where the sports editor there grabbed me and said, "Okay, you're in this team's discussion. You're deeply invested in the USA basketball team. Tell us, how does a team go from the dream team to sixth in the world, and how do they find their way back?" If you were if you were watching the Paris Olympics not long ago, and you might have seen Team USA win the gold medal in those Olympics, and in the process, they're back atop the world ladder. Now they're having to fight for it, but that's good, right? They have gotten so good, they're improving their competition at the same time, which is so powerful. Well, all that really led me to my first interview in this assignment, which was at USA Basketball Training Camp in Las Vegas, Nevada, where my first interview was with a man by the name of Jim Tooley. Jim is the CEO of the United States Olympic basketball program for both men and women. He's the CEO of USA Basketball. He's been in that role for 30 years. So he was there during the Dream Team. He was there when they finished sixth in the world. And he's there today as they're back atop the world rankings. But when I went to sit down with him, my real interest with Jim was what happened in that window when we sent all those all-stars to the Olympics and finished sixth. How'd that happen? What was wrong with that team? And he said, I'll tell you exactly what happened. He said the off factor was gone. He said there was a window of time where every time we walked into a gymnasium or we walked onto a court, everybody paid attention. Everybody was impressed. We were the gold standard. He said pretty soon it got to the place where when we walked onto a court or into a gym, the only people that were impressed were us. We were impressed by ourselves because they were spending their time catching up and we were not adjusting. What a great business lesson, right? You're on top. The last thing you can do is let yourself lose that passion for improvement that got you there. What got you there is not what will keep you there. You have to keep moving. But in that window of time when things were falling apart for USA Basketball, they had an opportunity to make some changes. And they brought in a new leader, a new top line leader, right? A new executive leader named Jerry Colangelo, who's basketball lifer. And he knew his number one responsibility was to hire the right coach, somebody who could take the team, mold them in the right fashion, and put them on the court together as one. And by this time, every player on the team was an NBA player. So people all assumed he was going to hire an NBA coach. Had to be that. But he made a very unconventional choice. He selected a college coach named Mike Krzyzewski. Coach K, to most people who cannot pronounce his last name properly, right? But Coach K, he said, was the right guy for 3 reasons. First, he had been an assistant on the Dream Team, so he knew what it meant to manage all those egos. Second, yes, he was a college coach at the time, but he was also the greatest college coach in existence at the time, right? At the time, he owned 5 NCAA championships with his team. Only John Wooden has more. But the third reason he was the perfect choice, Jerry Colangelo said, is that Mike Krzyzewski played his college basketball and then began his college coaching career at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He knew what it meant to wear the letters USA stitched on his jersey. Coach K came in and he did what he would argue any leader should do in a moment of transition. He would say it doesn't matter if it's, he would argue that you should do this if you're in a moment of transition. He went on a listening tour. He went to sit down not just with the players he was getting ready to coach, he went to sit down with the players who had left the team. He wanted to talk to them about the culture of the organization. He went to talk to his predecessors, those who had his job before him. He wanted to understand what he was walking into. And he came out of those conversations with a couple of big ahas. The first was that he would say that every team on the planet, his team, your team, my team, every team, can be essentially divided into two buckets. The first bucket are your patriots. Those are the people that believe what you're doing is important and they can't wait to help you do it every day. But the second bucket, those are your mercenaries. Those are the people who are working for you today until somebody can offer them $1 more down the street. And what Coach discovered as he was looking at the team he had was that USA Basketball was overly infected by mercenaries. They had players who were on the squad because Nike was paying them to wear their shoes in international competition. The swoosh on the bottom of their foot meant more to them than the 3 letters on their chest. And he said, you know what, I have to change the culture. I have to change the energy. And how do you do that if your employee base, if you will, right, are a bunch of highly paid professional athletes? Well, Mike Krzyzewski had an idea. And so on the first trip he took as the coach of that team, they were headed to Korea, they were headed to Japan, where they were going to play in the World Championships. But before they made that trip to Japan, Coach diverted the squad, and he took them for 2 days to his old stomping grounds, his first place of service in the United States Army, which was Korea. He wanted the players to live, eat, breathe, practice, hang out with the young men and women who were serving United States military interests in that country, looking across a bridge at an opponent with quite ill intentions. He wanted our players to recognize there were others out there wearing the same jersey, wearing USA on their jersey, but for a far different reason. Many of the players were just awestruck by the moment. Chris Paul, one of the players on that team, actually said to me that it was the most time he had ever spent at that stage in his life around people who cared more for others than they did themselves. That team was so taken by what they were learning and about the idea that they shared, they were teammates with these soldiers because they all wore the same 3 letters, that when the team went off to Japan to play in the tournament, and those games were all broadcast back to the soldiers in Korea, the players knew that. And so after every big basket that was scored, we've all seen athletes, right? Big moment occurs in a game, touchdown basket. What does the athlete do? They pound their chest, they point to their name on the back of the jersey because it's about me and I'm awesome. Well, these athletes on this team, after having that experience with these young men and women, when they scored a big basket during that tournament, the first thing the player who scored did was look for the nearest camera to salute. They wanted to send a message back to those soldiers to say thank you. Thank you for teaching me that today I am in fact part of something bigger than myself. I'm not just playing basketball for me. I'm working, I'm doing what I'm doing for you. Coach K said that was his first big aha, because what was created there was what he grew to call a feel it moment, where you feel who you serve, where you feel who you are, who you're working for, if you will. But his second big aha was that feel it moments don't last. That they're awesome in the moment, right? We're caught up in the energy of a feel it moment, but they don't last. So he knew that as the leader of the organization, he had to constantly bring those moments in to the cadence of his leadership. So the next year, as he's bringing the team together, he issues to every player USA Basketball dog tags. These are dog tags that actually had the USA Basketball logo on one side. On the flip side, they had details about the player, and just as a dog tag would if issued to a soldier. And the players were asked to wear these dog tags year round, and if they ended up in a hotel lobby or an airport hangar, and they ended up in the presence of a soldier, they were asked to go approach the soldier, ask his or her story, and at the end of the conversation, offer to swap dog tags. And if you watch that team over the next several years, while Mike Krzyzewski was leader, that team, at the end of warm-ups on any game or any practice, would take from their neck, each player, the dog tags they had collected, and they would lay them on a towel underneath their chair, because that's who they were playing for. The next year, Coach started bringing in members of the Wounded Warrior Project, soldiers injured in Iraq and Afghanistan, to talk to players about what it meant to care for each other, to talk about being a great teammate to each other. The year after that, he added in a relationship with a support organization called TAPS. TAPS works to support children who lost a father or mother in the wars of Iraq or Afghanistan. And those children will be brought to USA Basketball practices or even exhibition games. And at the end of the practice, at the end of the exhibition, when the event was over, the players would line up at midcourt, the children would line up at the free throw line, and then each child would be given an opportunity to step forward and tell the players a story about their mother or father. Each child was given buttons, pictures of themselves and their parents, and they would walk down the line and give the buttons to the players, and the players would wear the buttons all year long, because that's who they were playing for. And then in the year that I was working on this story for the Wall Street Journal, Coach decided to take the team back to his old stomping grounds at West Point. He wanted the players to understand what it meant to be commissioned as an Army officer, having worked their way through that academy. I had the chance, as I said, to be there as this two-day event was unfolding, and at the end of the first day, I ended up at the hotel there on the West Point campus, sitting in the bar area with several of the players. And a couple of them looked at me and said, you know what, people think I'm one of the best athletes on the planet. People think I'm one of the greatest, but I have to tell you, I watched great athleticism today. One of them said, you know what, you throw me in that wave pool that's there in the picture, that wave pool with waves lapping over my head, an 85-pound pack on my back. You throw me in that wave pool and tell me to swim from one side to the other, I would sink. Another said, you know what, we watched them on that obstacle course today. You throw me into that obstacle course, I probably don't finish. Well, as the evening was progressing, one of the things that was to happen was that Coach Krzyzewski and I were to get together to talk about what he was attempting to achieve by bringing the players there. Call came, I ended up there, and let me share with you just a little snippet of that interview with Coach about what he was attempting to do with players that day at West Point.
Most of our guys, it was something new. One, they had never been to West Point. they had never been around that many people who had dedicated their lives to selfless service. I mean, you weren't just putting your toe in the water. You basically did a cannonball into the pool of feeling.
Right.
It had that impact on our team. It was where you actually witnessed selfless service, sacrifice, commitment, honor, trust, all these things at the highest level, and you're around it all day, and you end up feeling those things. And then as a result, you feel deeper about being a representative of the United States basketball.
He wanted the players to feel it, to feel what it meant to be part of this organization, to be part of this team. But if you ask anybody associated with USA Basketball about the feel it moment that Coach created, that still hangs around the organization today, people still talk about it today, even if they were not part of it. It's a moment that occurred on the eve of the London Olympics. The team was preparing for that trip, and Coach asked them to meet him 2 days early in Washington, D.C. And there, he took them to Arlington National Cemetery. The day began with 3 of our best: LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, given the opportunity to place the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Shortly after that, General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, asked the players to follow him. He said, "Please come with me. I want to walk you through Arlington. I want you to hear stories." And not long after that, after he's walking them through, he looks at the players and said, "Would you come further with me? Would you come with me over the hill to Section 60? Section 60 are the freshest graves at Arlington. It's where the men and women who have most recently given their lives for United States interest are laid to rest." And as the players, one of them shared with me, as they were walking through that section, as they were looking down at headstones, birthdays younger than theirs, hometowns they recognized, no one knew exactly what to say. There was a sense of overwhelm. They ended up huddled together, everyone essentially silent. And right about then, Mike Krzyzewski saw a man about 150 feet away, standing amongst a group of graves. The man was dressed in civilian clothes. Coach assumed him to be a member of the military because he had a crew cut. The man had a backpack slung over his shoulders, and as he was moving from grave to grave, he was reaching in the backpack, taking out pictures, and laying them down. Coach walked up the hill, approached the man, and he said, "Excuse me, sir. My name is Mike Krzyzewski. I am the men's basketball coach for the United States Olympic team. And I'm wondering if you could tell me what you're doing here today." The young man looked back and he said, "Coach, I know who you are." He said, "This was my team. We had a mission. It didn't go as planned. And these are pictures of me and them in better days." Coach Krzyzewski said, "Sir, would you come talk to my players?" And he did. He walked over and he stood in the center of that collection of basketball royalty and started talking about what it meant to care for each other, what it meant to be willing to sacrifice for each other, what it meant to love each other. And after a couple of minutes, he started talking about survivor's guilt. He said, "I wasn't there that day, but I wished I had been." About that time, he started crying. And he turned around, he walked away. Long pause. Coach Krzyzewski leaned in and he said, "Gentlemen, this is why we came here today. Because I want you to feel what it means to represent the United States of America." That team did everything you could imagine. They went to London and they destroyed the world, right? No team outside of the dream team has ever put a collection of wins together like that team. Mike Krzyzewski says every good team knows it's why. Every great team feels it. You know, I was so taken by that in the way. But it's so meaningful to start thinking about all this that I wanted to understanding how important feeling is, right? And I'm telling you, that ability to get our team to feel why what we do matters, to feel why they matter within the team, is especially true today in the millennial and Gen Z generations. You know, I'm fascinated by that, by the studies that have been done in that space. And there was one in particular that really jumped out at me. It was done by Forbes several years ago. A couple of statistics, a couple of things that stood out. What Forbes did is they went out to find 100,000 representatives of the millennial and Gen Z generations. And they asked them a couple of questions, right? Essentially, they said, why do you work where you work today? And in a zero employment world, why do you stay? So the first statistic they offered in this research project that stood out to me was that I had no idea. By 2030, 4 years from now, 3/4 of our workforce is going to come from one of those two generations. So if we don't know how to get them to feel why what they're doing matters, that's on us, right, as leaders. But the second thing that stood out is that when they asked those two questions, the number one answer that came up for millennials, the number two answer for Gen Z, is they want to work someplace where they believe what they do, they feel what they do matters, that it matters. They don't just want to believe they're clocking in, clocking out. They want to be part of something that they can be proud of. And and as I said, it matters more today than ever. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. You guys remember the Great Resignation? Everybody was going to quit. They were going to go off and do their own thing because and everybody was going to. Well, that didn't take long to morph into quiet quitting, right? That idea that they weren't actually going to quit. They were going to keep taking your paycheck, but they weren't going to give you their full engagement because they were quietly quitting on you. And that morphed into what was a pretty hot hashtag for quite some time on TikTok, which was grumpy staying, right? This idea that we're going to be miserable and you're going to know about it, right? So this idea of how we engage our employee base, how we get them to stay with us, it matters. This is not a feel-good concept. This is something that is absolutely a driver in the economics of our success stories within our businesses. Well, you know, I don't want you just to think it's a sports story, though I will share a little bit of a sports angle to it around a charity. Um, I I've had I had the honor over 9 years to serve on the national board of an extraordinary charity called Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish offers um, they offer wish opportunities, moments, the trips to young children who are suffering life-threatening illnesses and their families. Well, my relationship with Make-A-Wish actually began quite a few years ago when I wrote a book for the organization in which I sat down with 25 of the top wish granting athletes and coaches on the planet and asked those coaches and athletes to tell me about the wish they granted that most changed them. I'm going to share one little nugget, one little story from that journey. It involved an NFL football player named Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady, he does evoke an awful lot of opinion and emotion. There are a lot of people that have very strong thoughts on who Tom Brady really is. I'm going to tell you, I personally, I like judging people on what I get a chance to see, and I saw Tom Brady is one of the great wish granters in the history of Make-A-Wish. He is so good to children, it's incredible. Well, as it happened, we're reaching out to Tom Brady about his involvement in the book, and the invitation came back. Hey, he's granting a wish next Thursday. Why don't you come and you can be part of the wish throughout the day. You can listen and be part of it. Well, so I make my way to Boston, and the wish is being granted to a 4-year-old little girl named Madeline. Now, it was a really impactful day for me because my daughter is also named Madeline, and on that day she was also 4 years old. But this Madeline had spent 2.5 of her 4 years in hospitals fighting cancer. But on that day, she was cancer free, and she wanted to meet Tom Brady. And I went to breakfast that morning with Madeline and her mother. That's her mother there in the red. And as we sat down, I actually did. I said, Madeline, you're 4 years old. Why do you want to meet Tom Brady? And she looked at me and she said, I have waited my whole life to meet Tom Brady. And I will tell you, I spent the rest of the day with Madeline's mom, and I think I know who really waited her whole life to meet Tom Brady. But as we get to the field, Brady grants Madeline this most extraordinary wish. They are rolling in the grass. They are laughing. They are telling stories. Just the silliness was so wonderful. He was caring for her in such a really passionate, wonderful way. But the wish then was coming to its close. Actually, this picture was snapped as the wish was coming to its close. It ran on the front page of the Boston Globe the next day. But as the wish is coming to its close, Madeline's mom, Tom Brady, decides to give Madeline a gift. He reaches around and he hands her a football, right? Um, you know, nobody measured the inflation rate of the football, though it was a little light on air, but that's okay. Tom Brady hands Madeline the football, and just as he's doing it, Madeline's mother, standing behind her, says, Maddie, there was something you were going to say to Tom Brady right before you left. And now this age, Madeline thinks she and Tom Brady are buddies, right? They've been friends, they've been hanging out. Like, she gives her mom kind of the stink eye, and she stuffs her fingers in her mouth. Her cheeks turn a little red, and then Brady leans in and he says, what do you got for me, Madeline? And Madeline looks up and she says, hubba hubba. And Tom Brady's cheeks turned a little red, but the wish finished off. But the reason I share this story with you is that at Make-A-Wish, we do something really extraordinary. I love every major event, whether it was a conference or a board meeting, every major event at Make-A-Wish begins with what we call a mission moment, right? Mike Krzyzewski calls them feel it moments. At Make-A-Wish, they are mission moments. But mission moments are an opportunity at the beginning of this session for a family to stand at the front of the room and tell us their story. Tell us the story of their wish. The child gets to talk about not being a cancer kid, but being a Disney kid, right? It's so amazing. And the family members talk about what it's like to be part of the experience. And these mission moments, they last 8 minutes. That's it. Sometimes the family can't make it, and they'll prepare a video for us. Sometimes the CEO of the organization will just stand at the front of the room and read us letters from children. But no matter how the wish is delivered, the mission moment is delivered, at the end of those 8 minutes, the light comes up, the lights in the room come up, we're all wiping tears from our eyes, and there's nothing you couldn't ask us to give you that day because we feel the mission, right? Mike Krzyzewski, as I said, calls them feel it moments. At Make-A-Wish, they're mission moments. But whatever it is, it's an opportunity for us to believe and understand that what we are doing is so, so important. You know, you might be sitting here and thinking, gosh, we're 50 minutes into this conversation, Don. I just got to ask, like, you know, first off, are you convinced, and I hope everybody is, that this kind of moment could have an impact on your team? Doesn't matter how big or small your team is, if you could have a moment where they all collectively feel what they're doing is important, wouldn't that impact the energy they bring to the job every day? But your second question is probably, Don, you have no idea what I do. How could I do that? Like, I can't do that in my business. And I'm going to argue that you're wrong, and that there are three ways that every team I've had a chance to work with, one of these three ways has some opportunity for you to create a feel it / mission moment in your team. The first is what we call product impact. What you're delivering into the world, what you're sharing with the world, what happens to those you serve if you don't deliver it well? What happens if you fail in what you've promised? Conversely, right? How much better is the world? How much better are those you serve if you succeed? But by the way, the real energy in this exercise isn't just by looking at who you serve. It might actually often be understanding who they serve. How serving your client actually allows them to change the world for others. And that is called understanding your downstream beneficiary. And the best I ever had a chance to learn this concept from was the CEO, a longtime CEO of an extraordinary medical device company called Medtronic. Bill George is his name. Medtronic, in the time he led it, went from 10,000 employees when he was hired to 40,000 employees by the time he leaves. And in that window of time, it remained at the top of the best places to work window in its space. Everybody wanted to work at Medtronic. If you were in that industry, you wanted to work there. So I went to see Bill George and I said, how did you do that? How did you keep that level of energy for such a long period of time? He named off a couple of things. He said, but by the way, there was one thing we started doing 10 years ago that really changed the dynamic. He said there was, that like many companies, Medtronic hosts an annual gathering of the team, right? Whether it's a sales kickoff, whether it's whatever it might be for you, but it's some kind of a gathering of your team in which you get a chance to be together and spend a little time maybe learning something about new products or whatever it is. But during that gathering, which they had every year in late November in Minneapolis in their headquarters, Bill George said they would bring their team together and they would carve out 1 hour of the 3-day event. They would carve out 1 hour in which they would bring to the stage 6 families. 6 families that were held together at that time because a Medtronic device was keeping one of the members of the family alive. And he said each family would be given a microphone and we would be given time to step forward and thank the employees, to say thank you for what you do. And he said every year, without fail, somehow it happened that a young woman would be given the microphone, would step forward, look at our employees and say thank you. Because your device does what you promised, my daddy got the chance to walk me down the aisle this summer. He said every year some young man would step forward, take the microphone and say, because your device is everything you promised, my grandfather is with us today, and a year ago every doctor said he wouldn't be. And he said at the end of that hour, they would line the families up at back tables. Each family had stacks of pictures on the table that they would autograph to employees of Medtronic, and those employees would take the pictures and they'd hang all over the buildings of their offices scattered throughout the country. But here's the deal, Bill George said. What you need to know is that we don't sell to families. We sell to doctors and hospitals. The families are our downstream beneficiary. He said bringing them in to talk to our team made such a difference. It created energy. People began to believe that what they were doing was so important, and they could see in the eyes of the people on the stage who it was important to. He said, so I asked him, I said, you do this every year? Doesn't it ever get old? And he goes, no, to be consistently successful, you have to constantly remind everybody that we have a greater purpose. And when we are locked in with what that purpose is, man, great things happen. So that's the first one of these 3 ways that you can create these moments. The second is really around community impact. Many of us live in communities that have at some stage some need, something occurs, and you might be, you should feel compelled to engage with your community, right? Your local community. And I'll share with you that often what happens is that the easiest thing to do, there's a crisis, there's something, let's make a donation, right? Let's write a check. Those checks don't really, they don't they don't make your employees, they don't fire them up, right? Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you a story. I think what you need to do is, instead of just writing a check, and it's still not bad to write a check, you need to collect it as a group and go do something in the names and to serve people, but do it together as a team. An example I love to share occurred a few years ago. I live in northern Florida, handle of Florida, and a few years ago it was coming up. It was coming up. It looked like it could be targeted right at our town, Tallahassee. But right before it made landfall, it wiggled a little west and it went and it destroyed this little town 40 miles west of Tallahassee called Marianna. Now, for 23 days, Marianna was without power. The community was just blown apart by this hurricane. Well, our team of employees actually, we discovered that a couple of them actually had connections into Marianna. They either had family that had once lived there or they still had family there. And so we decided as a group to go not just write a check to the American Red Cross, but go serve the people of Marianna. And we wanted to do it as a team. So we show up and we actually brought our children with us. It was so extraordinary, right? We brought our children with us and we brought rakes and chainsaws and we just went door to door and we helped people who were trapped in some way kind of clean up the disaster that had really affected their lives. We went on to work at a food bank, right? And actually help develop and put together packages of food that could be delivered to or shared with families that could make their way to a local church to receive those things. In the afternoon, we ended up working with a group of people that brought some of those blow-up things that came into so that the kids in the town had a place to go play. But as we did this, I'll tell you, our team for years has talked about that experience, doing that together, and what it meant to go pour into the lives of people, most of whom we didn't know, but the opportunity to go impact them together as a team created a community bond for us in our community as well, right? Our little family of employees. Now I'll tell you, a couple of years later, another hurricane was coming up the Gulf. This one was headed toward Tallahassee, didn't wiggle, and it actually hit our town quite substantially. It made a big dent. There were portions of our town that were without power for several days. My wife, when she fired up her laptop, one of the first emails that she saw when we were working our way out from this hurricane and its damage was actually from the pastor, Grady Gamble from Eastside Baptist Church in Marianna. He remembered us being there to help him, and he wanted to know, can we come over, and is there something we can do to help you? How can we help you? When you create good energy, when you do good things, and when you do them together, these amazing things happen, right? Energy is returned to you, and it's powerful. And that leads us to the third way that great teams can create these feel it moments. This one, any team can do, right? What can you do impactfully in the name of one of your teammates? Is there something you can do to help them in some either point of struggle or something that they care deeply about? We so love this idea that for many years we have had a Feel It coordinator at our team, somebody who works with our employees, and we look for opportunities to go do something in the name of those we work with to go show them how much we appreciate them. One example of them occurred in this picture. You'll see the second guy over from the left. He's got a red shirt on, a handlebar mustache. His name is Danny Jordan. Danny Jordan worked for us for many years, and I love me some Danny Jordan. Like, that guy is one of my favorite people, and I've loved knowing him for many, many years. I thought I knew him well, but I did not know till we asked this question that Danny Jordan actually had 2 miles of road that he had adopted. If you have an adopt a road program in your community, you adopt the road, but to adopt it, you get to put a sign up in which the name of the company or whoever you're adopting it for is on the sign. But in exchange, once a month, you have to walk the sides of that street and pick up all trash for that mile. I did not know that Danny Jordan, my employee, for years, had been walking these 2 miles of road, cleaning up these streets so that he could have on the signs the names of his two sister-in-laws. Two sister-in-laws who passed away, two sister-in-laws he loved so terrifically. He wanted them remembered, and he wanted their names on a sign. So you know what? Realizing how much that meant to him, we decided to shut down our office on a Friday afternoon and go walk the 2 miles with Danny, to go pick up that trash everywhere we could find. Picking up the trash happened a little more quickly because there were a number of us as opposed to just Danny doing it, which meant that we got done a little quicker than we thought. We ended up together as a margarita bar. And at this margarita bar, Danny Jordan got to talk to us about his two sister-in-laws and why he loved them so much, why they meant so much to him. But by the way, you might be thinking, gosh, every time you're talking about this, Don, you're talking about closing down your office. Boy, that's hard for us to do. So let me share with you, this isn't all about closing down your office. Sometimes it's as simple as asking what we can do for you or someone you love. One of our employees had a terrific relationship with an older married couple. This older married couple had been a part of her formative years, and they had poured into her, but she shared with us that the husband in that marriage passed away a couple of months before Valentine's Day, which meant this would be the first Valentine's Day in more than a half a century that the two of them had not been together. And our employee asked, I'd love to be able to fill her, Mrs. Wainwright's, mailbox with Valentine cards. Can we all write a card to Mrs. Wainwright? And so everybody took a card. Everybody wrote something to her, encouraging her, just loving on her in some easy way. And she was able to fill up the mailbox, and Mrs. Wainwright got to feel the love, not just of a team, but of this young woman who has so valued her. It doesn't take much, but it pours into the lives of your teammates, and they know they matter. And if we can do those things, if we can make our teammates feel that sense of matter, great things happen. So I'm gonna share. I hope you'll scan the code. I hope you'll stay in touch with me. I hope you'll ask me for the content. I hope if there's a question or something you have, you'll hit me on social media, whatever it might be. But I hope too that you'll think of today's presentation. You'll think of a team that feels their why. I hope you'll maybe think of who your why matters to. Maybe you'll commit yourself to studying other great teams. But I know if you do any of those things and you find your feel it moment, I could come back a year from now and your opponent will probably be on the sidelines taking pictures of you. Thank you so much, Kevin, for allowing me to share with this community what it means to build a great team. Thank you.
Amazing work, my friend. Powerful stuff. Folks, thanks for just watching online, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, or here with us on Riverside. Appreciate your attention here as Don delivered an incredible and inspiring speech on Feel It Moments. I want to start with just one question, Don. I think the phrase was, a lot of good teams know their why. Great teams feel it.
The great teams feel it, yes.
Throughout
Kevin, can you talk in your microphone a little bit? I'm struggling to hear you a little bit.
Yes, test right here. How's this?
Thank you. That's much better. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so throughout our conversations today, we'll turn this up a little bit. That should be a little bit better. throughout our conversations this week, Don, a lot of the speakers have been saying, knowing your why, asking most of the teams, do you know the mission statement? And most of the companies and the employees in that team could not repeat back the mission. This goes one step further with asking you to feel it. Now,
Right.
in that conversation or in the story, they were looking for someone who were going to help USA Basketball feel the mission of the United States, and they selected Coach Krzyzewski because of his history at Army. In our conversations today with our CEOs in our roundtable, one of the CEOs' question was, I'm looking to hire the next CEO. They need to have the experience to take the organization to the next level. And I've got someone on the staff, and I'm also looking for someone outside who has the experience, and I don't know which decision to make. How, Don, in the hiring process, would you go about hiring someone that can make sure that they have the feel it factor?
Well, I think what you really want is to make sure that the team, that the leader feels the mission, right? Before, so trying to make sure that you're absolutely locked in on what it means to feel the mission is super important, right? And I think that that's one of the great challenges is that sometimes we want the team to feel it, but we are lost in our profit and loss statements and we're lost in our numbers, right? And so can you feel it in a way that makes a difference, right? Can you actually make that happen? And I'm trying to figure out how to turn this on right, but I may have it just a little bit wrong here. Sorry about that, Kevin. I'm trying to go away from the
Just click share and then go to
Okay, my bad.
turn off. Yeah, you're good.
Whoops, there we go. Is that better?
I still see it.
Can you see me?
I can see you, yes.
Okay, great. So anyway, so I'm busy trying to figure this out, and it's but one of the things that really stands out is that idea that as the leader has to feel the mission. And if the leader can feel it, if the leader can feel the mission, then extraordinary things can happen. So I would start there. As you're trying to figure out whether it's interior, exterior, like do they know who we serve and why it matters to who we serve? Can they carry that mission forward into communication with the team? Unfortunately, for too often, right? They're not. They don't really know how to do that. They're busy. As I said, they're busy focusing on things that seem pressing, but what Coach K proved was that what ultimately is pressing is the ability to have that sense of collective mission.
It's so important, and oftentimes we forget, and we become, I think you said, mercenaries, right? We're focused on growth, right? We're focused on bottom line, and oftentimes these moments don't cost us anything, but we forget and we over prioritize as one does. In your experience with talking with all these companies and all these great teams, how did you, like in your questioning, what were some of the takeaways in terms of how did they build consistency and never get complacent? Talk about that.
I think a big part of it was trying to make sure that they had a strong sense of one of the best ways that you worry about complacency is that too often you're thinking about what winning looks like, and the truth is sometimes the best way to beat complacency is to build a higher level of commitment to each other, right? It's harder sometimes. I mean, you talk to any soldier, right? Most soldiers would tell you, yes, they wanted to fight for, right, the United States, or they wanted to fight for their government, whatever it is. But the truth is, the great ones are really more worried about making sure they're delivering for the people to their left or right, right? So if you're in a really good environment, you're more worried about making sure you're taking care of the people on your left and right, and that matters. That matters greatly.
It's interesting, and I'm trying to think about, you bring up a really good point with some companies who, let's say, make a widget, right? And the widget goes, you know, into a bigger assembly line, which then goes into something else. For those companies, I'm sure you've had dozens of conversations with this, and I'd just like you to hit on this point again for these companies. How can they communicate that feel it factor if the culture for many decades has been hit this quota, make this part for this assembly line?
By the way, all of those things still matter, right? I mean, you still have to, I mean, reaching this idea of feel it moment does not mean you're suddenly excused from hitting your quotas and doing all the things that matter. But you just bring a different level of discretionary energy to work if you believe that what you're doing matters, right? And so one of the things that we've done, I mean, like I've worked with companies, like I worked for a company in this conversation, working them through the issues, and it was a company that sold gas cards, right?
Okay.
You're thinking, could there be anything less emotional than selling gas cards, right? But what we challenged them to do, and what we worked with them to do, was to go look at who they were selling the gas cards to. And many of the people they were selling the gas cards to, the companies that they were selling them to, were long haul trucking companies. And those long haul trucking companies were delivering. Um, one of the companies that they were working with delivered people's household goods when the people were moving across the country, right? And so the whole thing became, okay, if you don't do, if your process doesn't work as you promised, if you don't deliver on your commitment to your client, what does that do to their client? And suddenly you start realizing this company was moving soldiers and their families from one duty station to another. And imagine now you're a soldier and your family, you're supposed to care about protecting the interest of a nation or whatever it might be. And you're really more worried about whether or not when your family's dining room set's going to show up so that you can actually have dinner together as a family. If you if you start realizing this is the downstream beneficiary question, right? Who do we serve? Who do they serve? And the further you're able to go down, there are times you're able to realize, man, we're affecting education in our community. We're affecting whatever it might be, right? Yeah, and so start thinking about what you do um, in a slightly different way. Yeah, I was another one of the companies was a restaurant chain. You think, oh, I mean, our job is to make people, but really, if is it to feed them, or is it to get their day started off right so that they can go out and be impactful leaders in their space? What are you? How are you seeing what you're doing, and are you capable in seeing them that way? Are you capable of realizing you're changing the dynamic for those people you get a chance to serve?
Don, well said. Thank you so much for coming back to Really Leaders Unite this year, 2026. Spending time with us on a Friday afternoon. Everybody, Don's at a team retreat right here. He's making time out of his day just to be with you. So thank you so much, Don. It means a lot to us and the Really Leaders community here today. Any last words? We've got the QR code up there. Any last words where people can find more information about you, or maybe a resource like a podcast or a book maybe you'd recommend to them?
Yeah, donyaeger.com is my website. I'm always honored to kind of be in relationship communication, especially into this community, because they're so like-minded, right? They care about so much more than just how wealthy they can make themselves. And I want to be able to kind of I want to be a resource. I'd like to be a partner. Um, and for many, like with you, Kevin, I'd like to be a friend.
Well, appreciate that, Don. And I feel like I'm a part of the family. I feel like I'm beyond a friend. I got the Christmas card this year, so I'm doing something right.
Awesome. We're always
Amazing.
welcome.
Well, Don, thank you so much. We'll let you go. Enjoy your weekend. Tell the team we say hello. And for everyone who's still on the call here with us today, just want to say thank you so much for being with us. Don, if you could just close out hit the share button there and just close out the slideshow. We'd appreciate that. And for everyone that's hanging on this call with us, one of the things that I'm thinking about as Don leaves the conversation today is the Coach Krzyzewski hire in this story, right? The Coach Krzyzewski hire. If you were to hire someone else that didn't have the same feelings, the same understanding of what USA basketball means, would the team be the same? Right? That's one thing I'm thinking about. The other thing I'm thinking about, takeaway, is the awe factor. Right? These teams put the USA players on a pedestal, and we're even taking team photos with them, as you saw there. Thinking about that as your company and your brand before your sales team gets on the phone with clients. There's an awe factor there. The story of your company, the brand, the positioning, how it makes them feel. The awe factor is something that if you invest into the awe factor, you're going to close more deals. You're going to have better retention and a better culture, and you're going to make a bigger impact. And all of that, as he mentioned today, will compound and come back to you. So just some thoughts there today from an inspiring, an incredible speech with Don Yaeger. Man, he really just pulls you in, doesn't he? He's got that natural tone, that slow tone that we just all love. And I think you all saw today why he's a top 50 keynote speaker ranked by Leaders Magazine. So Don, thank you so much again for being with us here today. Thank you everyone for tuning in, whether you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube, here with us on Riverside. We have one more session today. It's happening at 3 p.m. Pacific time. That's going to be with Simon Mainwaring, CEO of We First, author of the book Lead with We. And Simon talks about purpose-driven leadership. In a time of uncertainty, when chaos is going on in the global markets, there's so much uncertainty. How do you lead? Who's going to go first? Who's going to make a decision? Who has made the wrong decision? Simon Mainwaring's going to go over all of that today and how you can lead in the right direction. So hold on with us. We know it's late there on the East Coast time. If you're with us out in Florida or New York, thank you so much. We'll be back in just 43 minutes for another session of Leaders Reunite, our last session of Leaders Reunite, to wrap up an incredible 3 days with some of the best keynote speakers in the world. Thank you so much, and we'll see you